Welcome back to the podcast, guys. Today we're interviewing a good friend of mine. His name is Dan Isles, and we're going to talk about a ton of subdividing, water submetering, and new construction. He does all of this on his own. He's got a couple of businesses. So make sure you stay tuned. We're going to learn a ton of stuff. And if you have any questions for Dan or me, make sure you send us a message. In real estate, first impressions can make or break a deal. Whether you're listing a home for sale or marketing an investment property, having high quality photos are key at grabbing attention. If you want to stand out in the competitive Colorado Springs market, having high quality photos is essential. And Wayne over at Hamadi excels at getting the best possible photos for your property. He is based right here in Colorado Springs and specializes in capturing properties in the best light. If you're ready to take your property photos to the next level, make sure to contact Wayne over at Homadi and mention you heard about him from Tanner at Red and Joy Real Estate to get 20% off your next shoot. Remember, great photos can make the difference between a quick sale and a stale listing. So make sure to contact Wayne over at Homadi today. Dan, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I'm excited to have you here. How's your day going so far?
Hey Tanner, it's good to see you as always. My day's been eventful, but a good one nonetheless, and it's hard to have a bad Friday, so I'm happy.
Sweet. We actually met through the Better Life Tribe, which is really good, like accountability group, and we're both doing stuff in real estate. So give everyone a little bit of insight on who you are and what you're kind of working on right now.
For sure. So as of today, I'm a full-time real estate investor amongst a few different things. I had a career in civil engineering for about 11 years, and I had an educational background in urban planning. So those two things lend themselves extremely well to various aspects of real estate investing. So what I'm doing now is I do a few things. I do small developments for myself, so kind of my own projects. I do consulting work for other people. I've gotten pretty proficient at that, so I've started taking on other people's development projects and getting them approved as well. And then the last thing I do is I have a water submetering business, which provides water submetering systems for multifamily properties, which is a great way to pass along cost and increase net operating income.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So was it a pretty easy transition when you just kind of went from, it was civil engineering, correct?
Yeah.
When you went into like doing new construction type stuff. What was like the first deal you did when you kind of made that transfer over into the subdividing new construction?
Sure.
Space?
So my first like real estate deal actually was a development deal. I didn't necessarily start with like a single family home or a condo. What I ended up doing was my mom and her husband owned a duplex rental property, and I ended up buying the one next door. And the reason why is because both of them were on really good sized lots, and we thought we could potentially subdivide some land there and get something built. So that was actually my very first deal, was kind of a small land assembly actually. But with that said, I ended up renting out the existing house, which kind of became more of a traditional rental. And yeah, to your point about the career and how it helped, anything development related that requires drawings, due diligence, infrastructure, anything of that nature just landed kind of right in my wheelhouse. So it's kind of something I was able to work on the side while still having a full-time job.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So this first property that you did, give us a little bit of the insight on it and what the numbers kind of looked like. I mean, was it like from the start you were like, I'm going to do it as a long-term rental?
So there's kind of two ways to look at this one. So there was the existing house that was on the property, and it's still there to this day. And then there was the fact that I was also working to subdivide off excess yard space, right? So if we look at the existing house itself, it was literally just, I paid $248,000 for the property, put a small amount of money into it, less than $10,000, and then put tenants in it. Cash flowed about $100 on day one, and it kind of performed pretty well in its own right. Like, I bought that property for the sole reason of subdividing its backyard. But the house itself actually became a solid investment as the mortgage went down and rents went up. And I've since parted with that one at the beginning of this year. So that's kind of like the house itself. When it comes to the subdividing aspect of that property, what we ended up doing was we were successful in subdividing the rear yards off my and my mom's property. And what we were able to get was 2 building lots out of that. So we took what was 2 properties and we turned it into 4. And the nice thing is when you're able to do that, you create a tremendous amount of value out of essentially just moving paper. And it works extremely well in high cost of living areas where land is very expensive. So those 2 building lots, like on the day that they were subdivided, would have been worth around 350,000 combined. So that's kind of the power of doing this infill subdividing strategy.
Yeah. So what's the process that you go through when you're subdividing? Is it mainly just a lot of, like you said, pushing paperwork around with the city, and are there certain requirements that need to happen in order for a lot to qualify to be subdivided?
Sure. As with anything in real estate, due diligence is very crucial, and I would almost argue even more so on something like this. So I've gotten very good at the due diligence process when it comes to this. And essentially what I do is like I have a checklist and I start with, okay, what is the size of the property? Like, do I even have a sizable property that I can do some form of redevelopment on? The next thing I'll look at is zoning. What am I permitted to do as of right today? Or what would I potentially need a minor variance on if I wanted to push the city on getting something built? From there, I like keep going down my standard checklist, and I'll look at infrastructure. Is there sewer there? Is there water there? Is there potentially a sewer running through the property that could stifle development? And then from there, I kind of just keep going down one item at a time. Is it in an environmentally sensitive area? Is it near a major highway? Is it near something loud, like a lumber yard or something that could stop development? So by the time I go through the due diligence process, I'll usually have a pretty solid idea if I can do a development or not. And then I guess specifically on the subdividing process, you need a surveyor. That's kind of how you get it started, is having the property surveyed. And from there, you'll need an attorney and potentially an engineer.
What's a survey for everyone that wouldn't know? How's that process work?
So a survey itself is when, like, kind of the act of a survey and what it is. Okay, so what a survey is, it's a legal documentation and measurement of a property that defines the boundaries of a property and kind of legally states what piece of land belongs to what address. And so that way, it's kind of a legal thing more than anything else.
Yeah. I see it come up often if people are like, oh, I want to, say, build a structure in their backyard, or if they're like, I want to put a shed. You should probably still get a survey done to see where your property lines are. Because if you build on, like, your neighbor's property, and then they get a survey and like, oh, this is on my property, and they'll make you move it. And then you just brings up more problems if you don't get a survey in the first place to know where your land actually is.
Sometimes you'll get a survey and you'll find out your neighbor's shed is already on your property,
Yeah.
or their fence is well on your side, and all of a sudden now there may be a negotiation or something, whether land is actually transferring or somebody's removing their fence. There's all sorts of issues that can come up with that.
Yeah, definitely. When you do the subdividing process, are you able to change zoning very easily? Say you want it to get into, multifamily where you can put 2-3 units on it, but it's currently zoned for residential.
It's a super valuable strategy known as entitlements or entitling. And I personally have stopped short of that. And the reason why is the act of subdividing, although it kind of goes hand in hand with like a zone change, they are 2 different things. And the act of subdividing and potentially getting minor variances is generally a pretty quick process. And I find there's less pushback, even from the public or the city. When it comes to rezoning, that can be a really long and expensive process, and it all depends on what conditions your jurisdiction puts on you. So, if they want you to do environmental studies or traffic studies or noise studies, or maybe a geotechnical investigation where you're actually taking ground samples and whatnot, it can be really expensive and very costly. So my rule of thumb is the project would have to be big enough to justify a rezoning. What I've been doing so far has been more kind of 1, 2, 3 small infill lot kind of stuff.
Okay. So if someone were to want to build like, oh, there's this plot of land in the middle of town, there's likely some sewer stuff and other utilities there that you could access. But if it's only like a small residential lot where you could be do like maybe a 2-1 or a 3-2, could that not be worth it at that point because of all the upfront costs that you have to have with all those studies and getting utilities in to make it worthwhile?
I think it really depends on your area, right? So if we're talking like Seattle, where everything's crazy expensive, or California, yes, it's probably worth it all day long. If we're in the middle of Arkansas, where a vacant building lot is $5,000 and they're a dime a dozen, probably not worth it. I think it really depends on the value that you're creating.
Yeah. So if someone were to, get into wanting to do a new build, what are like some of the things that they should look for when trying to acquire a lot of land?
Sure. I'll kind of give you an example here. I'll use one of my own projects and maybe share some numbers with you.
Perfect.
Because that'll put it into context how this kind of looks. So I bought a property and it was 100 feet wide by 150 feet deep. The house was completely off to one side of the property. So when I bought this, I actually bought it sight unseen because I had done all my due diligence up front, and I was very confident that I could take this 100-foot wide property and split it into two. Okay, so the really interesting thing about what I do is I try to always keep the existing house. And here's why. It's really hard to get financing on land. Not a lot of lenders will do it, and the ones that do may only go up to a 50% LTV. When you have a house on the property, you can go look at a traditional mortgage. And even better than that, you could potentially put a tenant in there and have income coming in while you're doing your development. Or maybe you can flip the house as well, where if you tear the house down, now you have a property that's generating no income and you have a significant monthly burn rate. So on that property specifically, I was successful in it. I approached the town. They allowed me to sever a 50 by 150 lot while leaving the existing house on the other 50 by 150 lot. I had paid $410,000 for the property. Put some money into fixing up the existing house, around $60,000-$70,000. I was able to sell the existing house for $500,000. I then sold the vacant building lot for $312,000.
Okay.
So I paid $410 and came away with $812 on that.
Wow. Okay.
Minus the renovations, surveys, legal costs, and some other legal fees and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that one was a really good one.
So there was a vacant, like there were two structures on the property. Am I getting that right?
No, there was just
No?
one. It was just a house, and it was
Just a house.
off to one side of the property.
Got it. Okay. So then you basically sold that lot just for someone to come in and build on it, basically. So you didn't really do any touching. You just got it all prepped up and ready to go, and you're like, hey, here's a blank canvas. Go run with it.
Exactly. And again, because it was in a high cost of living area, the lot was worth over $300,000, which made it worth it all day long. I've done another one where I actually did tear a house down and then split the land into two building lots and then sold those to a builder. So when I first got into this, what I was doing was I was subdividing lots and then selling them to builders for a profit.
Hmm.
And then I started keeping land for myself to build on myself, to which I've started doing.
Okay. So before we get to that process and when you got into the building, how were you finding a lot of these lots that would be good for subdividing?
Sure, it's a good question. One of the things you can do is have your realtor set up searches for you that where, let's say, every property with 100-foot frontage, when it hits the market, you get an email or a notification. Or maybe it's if you're going through like search parameters, maybe it's I want to see every lot that's at least half an acre, that's at least 100 feet wide. Maybe you can even select that it's on municipal water or municipal sewer, and you can kind of filter through it. And all of a sudden, you have yourself a list where the chance of like a redevelopment or a subdivide is decently
Yeah.
likely.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I would say from since I'm an agent here in
Yeah.
Colorado, on the MLS, they don't give us the option to like select the length and width of the lots. It's more of just the lot overall square foot. So you probably have to start with anything that's on the larger side, which would be anything that's probably like 7 to 8,000 or larger, is what I would say would have potential here in Colorado Springs, at least.
Potentially, and like one other thing you can do too, and it all depends on what data you have at your fingertips. So, for example, if you know in your city, let's say there is a zoning class called R50, and what it is 50-foot lots. Maybe if it whether it's your realtor software or one of the other mapping softwares out there, maybe you can like select that as a parameter too, and like actually like pick the zoning class.
Hmm.
There are some options out there.
Yeah, that is another one. Like they do have specific zoning based off of the sizing as well.
Mhm.
There's one in Springs. I think it's styled like R1 9,000, which is anything that's residential but a 9,000 square foot lot or higher, is what that
Yeah,
one is.
and if you think about it, if you search for any property that was 18,000 square feet, like theoretically you would be able to subdivide it. So if you found something where the house was just awful, you know what I mean, like a tear
Hmm.
down special,
Yeah.
that's where you can start thinking about doing something like that. If what I find all the time is I'll find properties where there's some like excellent like redevelopment potential or maybe potential to subdivide, but the house is too good.
Mm,
And all of a sudden the seller rightfully wants the price that they're entitled to,
yeah.
but the price that they're going to get, it doesn't work for development. You're now paying too
Hmm.
much.
Yeah. So, how long did you do just subdividing before you start getting into, okay, now I have these lots, I'm going to start doing some building on it now?
Sure. I bought my first property, my first investment property, I guess, in 2018. I broke ground on my first build in early 2022. So I had flipped a few pieces of land in between then.
Hmm. So did you use your like engineering experience to kind of pull up all the drawings, and did you have to show that to any like partners that you did have on the project for whatever it's private money or lenders or contractors that are going to be doing the development?
Haven't really got much into partnerships. I've largely self-funded a lot of
Hmm.
what I've done.
Okay.
To the engineering background thing, it's super helpful. And here's kind of an example of where is a lot of times people that have properties and they think they can do something or they want to do something with it, and they'll approach the city. And the city won't really take them seriously because it's just a person showing up asking, "What can I do with my property?" When I approach a city, I show up with a professionally looking drawing going, hey, I would like to subdivide the lot just like this. It meets the zoning everywhere except maybe I need a minor variance here. And so I'm able to have just a way more productive conversation with the
Hmm.
city. So that helps a
Yeah.
ton.
Uh-huh. Got it. I'm sure they get tons of people all the time. They're like, "Oh, I want to do this and this," and they're like, we don't know how serious you are." And then, but when you show up, it's like, "Hey, I'm in business. This is what I want to do. Actually, respond to me in a timely manner and get this approved."
They
Um,
almost look relieved to a certain degree that they get to have like an actual conversation using the lingo, I guess, as opposed
uh-huh.
to just somebody trying to have the city tell them what they may be able to do. So,
Hmm. Yeah. So what was like the first step once you had the drawings? When did you actually get to breaking ground after you decided, okay, I'm going to subdivide it and do my own construction build on this lot?
It definitely takes a little bit of time, and so like when I did the first one, I was very green in operating with a little bit of uncertainty. I can definitely move a lot quicker now, but I think in general, let's say you acquire a piece of land, whether you buy it or you get it through a subdividing process like I'm talking about, you're probably going to be at least a few months getting some house drawings drawn up for you. You'll need servicing drawings or engineering drawings showing how the property is going to be graded and how the sewer is going to come in and the water line is going to come in. Some cities or counties or whatever may actually make you bring in the services ahead of time. That's something I've actually had to do on on at least one piece of land that I flipped. I still had to come out of my own pocket to cut open the road and bring in a sewer and a water service to that lot.
Hmm.
So like that's some of the upfront work that goes into it. You can anticipate a few months. And then a lot of times too, when the cities look at your building permit, they're going to come back with some comments, and then all of a sudden now you need to go back to your drawings person, and that whole process can take a little bit longer yet.
Yeah. So if you had a couple months of just negotiating with the city, getting the land prepped, with all the utilities and whatnot, just to eventually break ground. Once you do break ground, you're pouring foundations, getting all that, the structure built and everything. That could be what, a whole nother like 6 to 12 months potentially. So it
I
could
would
be like,
say, yeah, I would say exactly 6 to 12. I think six is probably the quickest you're going to get something built. Like, yes, there are huge commercial builders that can just slam up a house in 3 to 4 months, but I think the average person would be doing extremely well if they knock something out in 6 months. And for
hmm
what it's worth, when I
yeah,
did my first build, it was two houses. I was able to do it in 8 months, which is not too bad at all.
yeah. What are your thoughts on if the home is like built so fast with the concrete and like the ground not settling in time and causing potential foundation problems later on?
It can happen. I've had some settling issues too. Like your driveway is probably going to settle on you. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
uh, it's a good question. It can happen. Typically, if you follow the building code and you hire competent contractors, you should be good. But if you have a contractor that's wants in and out real quickly, your house has a basement, they just put the wet, heavy material that they just took out of the hole instead of bringing in lightweight, proper fill. Stuff
Okay.
like that can happen. And like I said too, things like driveways are notorious for settling for a year or two, and maybe you don't want to pave it until year three. So there's things,
Oh, okay.
considerations like that.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. If you're planning to get photos done on your next listing or rental property, don't forget to reach out to Wayne with Homani to get 20% off your next shoot. Um, with the dry dirt that they bring in, is that like something that you should like check with your contractors? Like, hey, what's your process? You should definitely be getting rid of all this dirt and bringing in new dirt to like almost do that layer or whatever. Yeah.
It's a conversation worth having, and at a minimum, it lets the contractor know you're thinking about it. You know what I
Hmm.
mean, and
Yeah.
therefore they need to be thinking about it as well. There are lots of examples where the material on site goes back in the hole, and it's fine. It's just um, it's kind of a game time decision that a contractor would have to make.
Hmm. So you do this with the thought in mind of building the property, holding it as a rental, not building it and then selling. Correct?
Yep, yep.
Hmm.
To date, I've just built and held
Hmm.
kind of small multifamily. Here's the
Hmm.
thing, and this so depends on where you live in your jurisdiction.
Hmm.
There are places where you are allowed to build your own home and you are allowed to build and hold something. But when it comes to building and selling something, there's usually a warranty factor there, right?
Yes.
Because someone
Hmm.
buying a home needs to know that if a window starts leaking, or you know what, Tanner, it can be as small as a screw hole, a screw pop, and in my area, you have to enroll in a warranty program and you have to be licensed to a certain degree. So I'm absolutely able to build properties for myself that I plan on keeping or going to live in. But building and selling is a whole nother ballgame.
Do you ever find yourself getting into that area, or just not as of right now? It's not your focus.
I think my plan is I would love to get a sizable portfolio of newly constructed multifamily. And once that's established to my liking, I would consider it after the nest egg's built.
So, are you building everything, and then is your plan to like do a refinance after you get the whole thing built up?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's essentially I'm doing the BRRRR strategy, but it's build, rent, refinance, repeat.
Got it. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Would you prefer that compared to just finding a property and then just like renovating and then refinancing? Um, I mean, you have the skill set to be able to do it from the build, like
Sure.
scratch lot. But do you find that you could do it the other way? You just prefer it this way because you
It,
can make the numbers work more.
yeah, and I have done the other way. I do have a couple traditional rentals as well. But one thing that you can do, and we already kind of touched on it, is if you can subdivide a piece of land and get a building lot and it's worth significant value, and then you go and you build on it, you already have a ton of equity built in there. And when you go to refinance that, essentially you're like I only had to ask for like a 65% LTV to get all my money out of my last build. And
Okay.
then it makes the cash flow that much better. It reduces risk, as we all know, taking on less debt. And that's been kind of my philosophy.
Awesome. What are some of the big challenges you've had in your new construction projects that you can give us a good story about?
I've had a bunch. So to date, I've built a ground up 4 unit building, and actually, what it is, it's a pair of semi-detached houses. So it's actually two addresses, even though it's the same building. You know what I mean? So that was my very first, and I general contracted it myself. And there were some lessons to be learned when you take on a new build for the first time. Um, some of the things I had to learn, like I'll give you an example. We had cut open the road and we brought in a new sewer and water service to the two new houses. Um, we poured the new sidewalk because we had to rip out the existing sidewalk, and we put down the asphalt. And then it was about 4 weeks later, I was now gonna be pouring concrete in the basements of the two houses. The cement truck backs into the driveway, ready to pour the basements, and absolutely pulverized my brand new sidewalks.
Oh no.
Meaning I had to rip them all out and pour them again. And it's just,
Dang.
there was a bunch of things like that where it's kind of funny now, but just little things like that. But
Yeah.
you know what though? The one thing I can say is I didn't go into this fully blind. I do a ton of networking, and I know a lot of guys that have done a bunch of builds. I had a couple guys on the phone kind of come out to site occasionally, look things over. And so, yeah, there was a few things I had to learn the hard way. But having that kind of experience in my corner and just a phone call away, like, really, really put me ahead when it came to doing something like that.
Is there like a almost like a network group of all just like people that do new construction in your area, or even all over the globe, really, that you connect with?
Yeah, for sure. I'll go. I've joined groups that kind of specialize in kind of what we've talked about today. I'll go to networking events and seminars and stuff like that. So I do find kind of no matter what your niche is, there's some group out there that's happy to have you.
Yeah. Um, so let's talk about your other business that you do, which is the water submetering.
Sure.
Give us a little bit of insight on that and kind of what is water submetering.
Sure. So just a quick history on that is I was doing a duplex project, not a new construction. That was one of the few traditional projects I did. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to separate all the utilities and have the tenants pay for all utility costs. To which I did. I actually put two furnaces in the property, two air conditioners. I separated all the ductwork. I separated the electric panels, and then I started looking for a way to separate water. But water's tough. There's a reason why multifamily properties have multiple electric panels and one water meter. So what I did is I had my plumber split the water throughout the building, and I bought some submeters and a digital system that would read the submeters. Started using that. I was absolutely able to pass along all the water costs to my tenants. I started telling other investors about this system I had purchased and showing pictures and whatnot, and people started asking me if I could get them one, to which I started doing. And I eventually, what I ended up doing is I reached out to the manufacturer. I said, hey, I'm doing these kind of small multifamily properties. I have a lot of interest in your product. I'd love to start selling your product formally. And they were happy to work with me, and that's kind of how I got started doing that.
Cool. So you would say that the best benefit then to landlords that are looking to do this on their properties is it's an easier way to pass on the cost of water to the tenants because they, submeter it to the exact mark of what goes to which unit, basically.
For sure. There's two main benefits. The big one is tracking water and passing along costs. The other one is the systems that I'm carrying, they'll also notify you of any suspected leaks or water abuses. And what's a landlord's number one fear? It's pretty much water ruining their property or tenants being nuts with water. So think about this. I actually had this happen. Tenants left for a weekend. The toilet had just recently started running continuously. I get an email notification. I'm able to go over there and deal with it right away because the toilet, in the time that it had been allowed to run, had used almost a month's worth of water in one day.
Wow.
So stuff like that is super useful.
It's funny you bring that up because I was talking with Miller, a friend of ours, Miller McSwain, and he does a lot of co-living, and he had three toilets on one property that were all running at the same time, and he said it cost him almost $1,000 in water costs in that month just because the toilet was constantly running. And so he basically would have avoided this if he had some type of, I guess I don't really know how it works. This was on a single family home, and if single family homes, I don't know if they tell you that stuff for the meter. What do you know about that?
Sure. Well, you could do something like that. More often than not, people that reach out to me, it's for multifamily properties as small as a duplex. You could absolutely still put on a water tracking device in a single family. And then so all of a sudden now you're not necessarily billing water to tenants or anything.
Yeah.
But now you have the notification. And actually one thing that's even cooler that I'm kind of investigating right now, there are Wi-Fi water valves. So imagine you get a notification on your phone that there's a suspected leak, and you can just push a button and kill the water to your property. There's some value to be had.
That would be awesome. Yeah.
For sure.
Huh. I also think it's crazy that just for a simple toilet running, it's a $50, $100 fix for the new valve inside the toilet or sending the handyman over to fix it, but it can cost you a lot of money by not having that small issue repaired at the end of the day.
I always make the argument to people when I'm making sales that it's better to find out as it's happening than on the city's water bill, because usually once it's on the city's water bill, they don't care, and you're gonna have to pay it.
What's the typical cost for getting water metering set up on a property?
Sure. So the way these systems work is there's a central gateway unit. It kind of looks like an internet router. And then from there, you can put a whole bunch of water meters to it. So you can kind of do one water meter up to 50. And then there's even another system that'll go into the thousands of units, which is used for large condo buildings and stuff like that. It's typically whether you have one unit or 50, it's about $1,000 for the gateway, and then each additional meter comes out to about 140. So you kind of rough a cost out that way. But I always make the argument to people that if you install one of these systems and you're able to pass along the water costs, just in the saved water, it'll pay for itself in about a year or two. But if putting in one of these systems is the difference between, again, you paying for water or not, your net operating income goes up, which means the value of your property goes up. And I can make a pretty strong argument that just by using something like this, just by installing it, it largely pays for itself.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm sold on getting water submetering done. What's your primary market that you are selling this in?
I'm selling this all over the U.S. and Canada. So I'm actually located in Ontario, Canada. So I do a lot of sales in my area, but these systems are like very foolproof. So I've been able to sell them kind of all over the place because they get shipped out, set up specifically for your property. And so again, since they're kind of foolproof, I'm able to sell them anywhere. And my target audience or target market has been anybody doing kind of small to medium sized multifamily. Anyone taking a house and converting it to a triplex or new construction lends itself extremely well to this. So that's kind of who I go after.
Awesome. And one more question about the submetering. When you send this out to wherever they're located, what's the install process like? Is there a certain guys that do the install? Do you organize the install? How's that all work?
Good question. So what'll happen is let's say someone with a 4-unit building comes to me and they want one of these systems. What I'll do is I'll get information from you up front, things like your company name and billing information, all that, and I'll use that to open an account. From there, I'll ask what you want the units called. Do you want them A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, 4? And then I set up the system specifically for your property. So when it shows up, all the meters are labeled where they go. It's just a matter of hiring your local plumber to install the 4 meters. From there, it's just a matter of plugging in the gateway unit, connecting to the internet with it, and then you're live. So it's a pretty foolproof process, but yes, there'll be a bit of plumbing work involved as well.
With the Wi-Fi aspect of it,
Yep.
is it best if like the landlord is providing Wi-Fi to the area, or do you attach onto the tenant's Wi-Fi? And what happens if there's a vacancy during the time period?
Great questions. There's 3 ways to do it. So first off, the easiest way is just if you have internet at the property. So I find more and more landlords are putting internet at their property. Maybe they are using it to entice higher rents or to just charge the tenants for the internet. Very often now you'll see cameras or Wi-Fi door locks, which all requires internet anyways. On some of the small properties, some people will put it on a tenant's internet, which works fine. It's just, yes, if one tenant moves out, you may have to switch it to the other tenant's internet, or you may have to wait for someone else to move in, to which the system is still recording all the usage during that downtime. But
Okay.
it can be a bit of a turnover item. And then the last way is there is a SIM card in the system. So you can turn that on, connect through cellular. But that option there does come with some monthly cost, where if you're able to supply your own internet, there's no monthly recurring costs.
Cool. So when you're in the Canada market, U.S. market, what are some of the differences that you see between the two markets?
Do you have a whole hour? No. There definitely are some differences. The biggest one is on the lending side, I think, more than anything else. So you guys in the U.S., you're used to your 30-year fixed mortgages, right? So we don't have those up here. Actually, the majority of the world doesn't have those. And so what happens to us is we can amortize a mortgage out to 30 years. So spread the payments out for 30 years, just like you're familiar with. But we have terms. And so what's very common is you get a 5-year fixed mortgage. But at the end of that 5 years, you have to renew. and you're now renewing at whatever the interest rate is. So
Yeah.
there's some people in some sticky situations up here at the moment, since interest rates have went up 10 times in the last couple of years.
Yeah. In the U.S., we call those ARMs,
Yes.
adjustable rate mortgages. Is that, or do you typically see those rates being higher or less than a typical like U.S. 30-year mortgage?
So our straight up rates are usually lower than yours, by a little bit. When you guys were getting your 2% mortgages during COVID, we were getting
Yeah.
1%
Wow.
mortgages
Okay.
during COVID. To your point on the ARMs, we have that as well. It's typically called variable rate mortgages. And what happens, what actually I had one on a variable rate mortgage, and what happened is every single time the Bank of Canada increased the interest rate, my mortgage went up, like every time. So what had happened is I had a property where the mortgage was $771 and it went up to 1250, like wiping out
Yeah.
almost all my cash flow on that one.
Uh-huh.
So, and here's the thing too. Canadians take those kind of mortgages at levels you guys would never do. And the reason why is because when we break a mortgage up here, there are some really, really stiff penalties. But if you have a variable or an adjustable rate mortgage, the penalty is just a few months interest, as opposed to like a fixed rate where you can actually be paying out the entire interest differential, over
Yeah.
the remaining term of the mortgage.
Uh-huh. Interesting. So does that make you have to invest and think about investing differently because you're only using variable rate mortgages?
I wouldn't say you're only using variable rate. There, a lot of people still do like a 5 year fixed, which means you are locked in for 5 years, just like you guys are familiar with.
Yeah.
It absolutely does. Like if you're planning on flipping something or doing something short term, you do have to think about, whether you want to take a 1 year fixed or a 2 year variable or something like that. Like these are probably all terms that are maybe new to you, but that is definitely something we have to put a lot more thought into than maybe you guys do.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Weird how every single market, even in the North America, you would think that U.S. and Canada would be very very similar in some aspects, but can be completely different and force you to invest differently. That's weird.
I would say the similarities are they're more similar than they're not, but that one aspect of lending, is definitely a notable difference. A couple other things, Tanner, that you guys may not be aware of is, since interest rates went up and they went up in unison with the U.S. Some of our biggest markets have fallen almost up to 30%. Like that is very
Yeah.
significant.
Uh-huh.
So think about this. Imagine you have a property, and let's say you're doing a major renovation on an investment property, and interest rates go up 8, 9, 10 times. So automatically your payments go up. Then the market falls 30%. So all of a sudden now you're paying way more. Your ARVs come way down. And there's been some people in a lot of trouble up here, and I've witnessed some bankruptcies. I've witnessed some folks lose properties, and I've witnessed a lot of people lose money into the 6 and 7 figures over that.
Wow. Yeah. Interesting. Two questions left for you.
Sure.
Do you have a good motivational quote that has helped you get through your growing and scaling of your real estate portfolio so
Sure.
far?
I'm not sure if it qualifies as motivational, but my number one quote when it comes to real estate and business is your network is your net worth. And that one gets thrown around, but I am an embodiment of that. I would not be building houses, have quit my job to work on my own, all sorts of things. I've met yourself. If
Yeah.
it had not been for networking, I can't stress enough how important having a solid network is.
Definitely. I 100% agree. And I think in real estate, it's very important to make sure you have the right people around you and that are helping you, pushing you forward, and helping you learn throughout your real estate journey. So
For sure.
definitely a good one. Last question is going to be if anyone wants to reach out to you about your submetering business or may have a few questions about the Canada market or doing some subdividing, where can they find you at?
Instagram's the best. It's illes_invest. So that's ILLES_invest. And yeah, reach out anytime. I'm always happy to chat.
Awesome. We'll put that down in the comments as well so people can get to you pretty quickly. But thank you again, Dan. It was awesome. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Tanner.